Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Brad Wilson, and today's guest on the show is Gareth James. Gareth is the founder and head coach of the prestigious MTT Poker School, the co-host of the Mindset Poker podcast, Poker on the Mind, where he and past CPG guest Tricia Cardner, who herself is a poker performance wizard and author who sports PhDs in both psychology and criminology, help you improve your mental game, and co-author along with the aforementioned Dr. Tricia Cardner of Purposeful Practice for Poker. Gareth graduated college with a degree in music and aspirations on becoming a behind-the-scenes player in the music industry. He settled into a gig teaching music to children, where he quickly learned his idea of helping kids learn to be more musical was very, very different from public education's. Stop me if you've heard this story before. Loads of talent, unhappy career, wants more autonomy in their professional life. Bingo, bango, bongo, a professional poker player is born. In today's episode, you're going to learn the exact moment Gareth knew he was going to become a professional poker player, the behind-the-scenes story of how Gareth landed the gig training Berkey for the massive $300K buy-in High Roller Bowl final table in 2016, the form of learning Gareth believes is rocket fuel to your poker game, and much, much more. So without any further ado, I bring to you poker coach, author, and podcaster, Gareth James. Gareth, good morning, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going very well. I realize it's not morning for you, but you'll have to humor me because my brain is still 12% thawed, being 10 a.m. for me.
Yeah, I've been up a few hours, although I'm onto my second coffee of the day, but it's like a post-lunch coffee for me.
Yeah, the post-lunch coffee. I'm on my first one. And it's pre-everything coffee. Yeah. No breakfast, no nothing.
Okay.
So starting out this show, typically ask my guests to tell me their story. How'd you get in the world of poker?
Okay. Yeah. So I started off, I just finished university. So I did a degree in music, and I was living with a guy who did the same thing, and he was playing some online poker, and I thought, wow, this looks like fun.
Why music? Why has music always been very important to you?
Yeah, since I was about 15, when I was 15, I went to a recording studio for the first time and fell in love with the idea and the process of making music, recording music, writing music, and from the age of 15 till about 20, well, probably much further on actually. I really had these aspirations to be a songwriter and producer and maybe a singer as well, but I was more interested in like the behind the scenes, like making music and producing and things like that. So things definitely changed.
Why was it so interesting to you?
I don't know. Like originally when I was about 11, my sister recommended that I should audition for like the not the school nativity, but like the Christmas show. And I'd never sung before, and I sang and I got the part, and I sang. And then ever since then, I mean, my sister was a big inspiration, like in terms of music, and I loved music growing up, and studied it throughout school and then into university. And it was just really big thing, which is interesting because my parents aren't musical at all. So just my sister and I who were very musical, really into that, and that was a big part of things. And I actually from there, studying music, went into being a music teacher for 6 years. So it definitely continued. But I think there's actually, sadly, the music teaching that kind of all the passion for music just disappeared. Suddenly it wasn't about music, it was about data, and it was about getting kids a piece of paper at the end of it, and it wasn't about making music and seeing the sort of like the importance of music in life.
And so not exactly fulfilled with your music teaching career.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it.
And now we can tie back into poker. Like, what was happening in your life when you stumbled across online poker?
Yeah. So I was living with a guy. He and I just became like best mates at university. And once we'd finished, I then worked at the university where we were. I just doing like the data entry when I was like data admin, that kind of stuff. Whilst I was trying to decide like where I wanted to go next. And he was playing online poker, and I was like, oh, this looks like fun. Like, and I'd always been like trying to find this sort of like get rich quick scheme. And I thought, well, poker, this could be it. And I, deposit $10, lose $10, and rinse and repeat. And I was like, okay, let's play fixed limit so we can limit our losses. So I play like, I don't even remember what it was, but 2-cent or $2 buy-in limit poker. And so I wasn't going to go broke. And then I stumbled across sit and goes, and like I would pay like $1 to enter and then win $5. This was incredible. And then I discovered MTTs, and I thought, well, you can turn $1 into 200. And then there was one summer I played a $2 turbo and turned it into over 2,000. And I thought, hang on a minute, this is something that might be worth pursuing a bit more. So that's what I did. And then I started to play more and more MTTs. I built up roles on different sites with sit and goes, just playing really low stakes, $5, $10, $20 games, and then had a role for MTTs. And then, just had, some reasonable scores, within MTTs, and had a bankroll. And, but all of this was going on whilst I then moved to London, and trained to be a teacher. And still had, in the school holidays, I would like play poker. But then during term time, it was quite difficult to do it. Like I definitely couldn't play on a Sunday night and then get up for work at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. and go and teach for weeks. So, it was generally just in the holidays I was playing. And then, gradually I was playing more and more poker, and at the same time as teaching. So, things were interesting where I, would do a full teaching day, come home at 6 or 7 o'clock, log straight into, I was playing on like Absolute Poker at the time, and would play, on the other sites as well, Stars and Full Tilt, and would play until 1, 2 a.m., go to bed, get up the next day, go and do a full teaching day, and realize that this was definitely not the kind of life that I really wanted.
The old Serious Poker Network, Absolute and Ultimate Bet. Those were interesting times back then. While you were trying to juggle, your career teaching and also your poker career, were you learning? Were you studying out, or were you seeking out information on studying and maximizing your poker ability at all?
Yeah, I read a lot of books at that point, which is interesting because I'm not convinced now that that's the best way to learn. But yeah, I read a lot of books. I signed up to some training sites. I was working on my game. I met a few people on Twitter, and we started to form a study group, and we were working on it in that sense. But yeah, it originally started with just me working on my own, reading books. Like when it came to like sit and goes and MTTs, it used to just be, you could read a book on sit and goes, see what the sort of the key hands to push were at different stack sizes, what you would call, what to do on the bubble. I was using like sit and go wizard back in the day, long before like HRC or ICMIs or anything like that. And so I was definitely working on it. I wouldn't say it was anywhere near how much I work on it now. But it's back then it was like, this is what I need to do. And the thing was that poker was a lot simpler and a lot easier then as well. So you almost didn't need to do as much work as you do now to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, the average player was operating at a much lower level than they're operating now. Let's diverge from the timeline a bit, because you said something there about books and you don't think it's the best way to learn with what you know now. So that begs the question, what way do you think is the best way to learn now?
So it's the whole idea of like passive learning versus active learning. I think that you've got to take an active role in your own development, your own learning. And I think that it's too easy to like read a book and not make notes. It's too easy to watch a video and not make notes, just kind of watch a video or watch a Twitch stream and not actually sort of absorb the knowledge that's being shared. And I think that it's really important to actually, absorb it and then and sort of use it in your own game. So, if someone's looking at a concept that you're not that familiar with, then, taking it in and then thinking, right, okay, how can I apply this to my own game? Or, why is this important? Why, how is this going to help my own game? How's it going to help my coaching? Stuff like that.
What do you think about the note taking? So is there a specific way you feel the listener ought to be taking notes while they're consuming this content?
I think it's important to sort of look at the key ideas. What is it that's being taught? So, sometimes it's easy with a training video because literally the title of the video will be on, I don't know, out of position C betting or, 3-bet jamming. But if it's like, play and explain or, just a hand history review, then it can be more challenging to like really home in on what it is that's being taught and also what you should learn. But I think if there's ever in those, hand history reviews or the play and explains, if there's ever a time where, you're, oh, wow, I've not really thought about this before, something that's sort of like a light bulb moment, then you definitely want to be making notes about that. And then, again, trying to apply it to your own game or discussing it with someone else, taking it from just like consuming it and just watching it or listening to it or whatever, to suddenly, writing it down, actioning it, talking to other people about it, expanding on the ideas a bit more.
Yeah. And Play and Explains, as a content creator, I love making them because they're so easy to make, because it's like you just fire up tables, start the recording software, and you just narrate for 30 minutes or an hour. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that in Play and Explains, oftentimes we have so many thoughts that we don't verbalize. And we have reasons for why we take very specific actions that the listener or watcher is not aware of. And then they try to take that away and apply it to their own game. Yeah. And they splat on the pavement without really understanding the key concepts that were at play there if the person who made the video didn't verbalize them. And that's going to happen in every Play and Explain video that's ever created for all time, just because there's so many variables, so many factors that go into each decision that's made at the poker table that you can't accurately express all of them. And that's, so for me as a creator, they're easy and I love making them, but I don't think as for a consumer, they're a great way to learn and improve your poker game. It's too much of a shotgun type approach when, we ought to be using a sniper rifle to hone in on very specific areas where we learn the concepts, we get them down pat, and then we can apply them, today and then moving forward into the future, versus kind of just this monkey see, monkey do type approach of, oh, I saw somebody do this one time, so now I'm just going to start check raising my gut shots. Well, why did they check raise a gut shot, right? Like who knows why, right? Like, misapplication it's very dangerous and just something that, the listener ought to be aware of.
Absolutely. What I really liked when you just talked about that was the key word why. And that's something that I try to explain in a lot of the coaching that I do and the content is try and explain the why. Now, sometimes it's not easy. Like the solver doesn't come with the answer. And that's like, for me, that's the most exciting part of the job, is that, is just try and work out the why and try to break it down so that other people can understand it. Because that's sort of how I see my sort of role within the poker industry, is being able to break down these, perhaps complicated concepts and ideas and topics and making them easier for more people to access. And I think that, sometimes you can look at a solver and not really know what's going on, but, the more you do, the better you get at sort of working out the why. Is it to do with blockers? Is it to do with how the equities, how the two ranges interact and with different types of boards, what happens on different turns, how do the equities shift, and all of these kind of things that, so I think that's that why is so important. And and I think as soon as you get the why, then it starts to like be easier to try to work other stuff out on the fly. And I think because the problem is I see a lot of training videos, a lot of coaching, it's literally like, okay, this is what I would do. All right. So, the student would go, or whoever it was would just go, okay, so what do you do here? And they would go, oh, I would c-bet. I would c-bet third pot. I would c-bet, whatever. And there's no why, there's no explanation. There's no like, well, how do they use that information in the future? If you explain that, okay, this is a board that's a really high c-bet because of, you have an equity advantage and nut advantage, you're in position, their range has a lot of auto folds, go into a lot of these reasons, and people can start to understand why it's a good spot to range bet, for example. But I think that there's quite a lot that I see as like, okay, this is what I would do, no explanation, and not very helpful for someone trying to learn.
Absolutely not. And that's why when I do private coaching with my own students, I have them make play and explain videos that I watch, and I make them verbalize their thought process at every single decision point, because I want to know why. Like, we can look at a hand history, we can look at your database, but you're going to manufacture a reason as to why you think you chose that action that happened 2 weeks ago, but it's not going to be very accurate. When you're verbalizing it in the moment, you're giving the why behind the decision. And sometimes you can make a perfectly great decision for all the wrong reasons. And it's absolutely worthy of diving in and examining the logic there and trying to find the upgrades, right? It's like, the action that you take ultimately, it isn't even the most important part of the puzzle. The most important part of the puzzle is your thought process, the logic, the why as to why you took that action. You can take wrong actions for all the right reasons as well, right? Like you can make a poor decision, but have a decent thought process and use decent logic that needs to be rerouted. But just verbalizing and understanding like every action that you take, every action that your opponent takes at the poker table is going to mean something. There's some data there. It's a variable that you ought to be using in your thought process. And, for folks that make a play and explain video on their own, but have problems verbalizing what they're doing, most likely you don't really know what you're doing. You're kind of just clicking buttons and making it up on the fly, right? And that's a pretty clear sign that you're operating at a fairly low level as a poker player. And there's a lot of room for improvement. But I'm with you. The why is ultimately what matters more than anything.
Yeah, I think it just as you were talking then, it made me think that I don't know if you've ever done this, but you could listen to a really good player talk about their game, and actually they don't really know, they can't explain it, right? And I think sometimes I was reading a book, I think it's Thinking Fast and Slow, where it talks about sort of thoughts and feelings come from a different part of the brain than explanations. So it talks about how it's not always easy to be able to explain why you love your wife, right? And I think that sometimes in poker that can be quite similar. Like you get some really good players, some really high level players, they just aren't able to articulate the thought process. And I think that that's where like the skill of a coach really shines through. And this is, there's always been the debate, like, if you want coaching, do you go to the best player or do you go to the best coach? And I think that it's really important that you find someone that works right for you, that it's not just like, you trying to find the best player, because they might not be the right fit for you. They might not be able to explain concepts in ways that you can understand. And they might just, this is what they do, and they want you to emulate that. But then you're not developing, not necessarily your own style, but your own thought process, your own ability to solve these problems.
A lot of stuff is just really difficult to break down. Like, watch a Phil Galfond video sometime on Run It Once, and it's like 15 minutes on this one hand where it's just like he's covering every single base of every single action that he's going to take. And it's like, oh my God, like whenever you actually empty out your brain to all the thoughts that are whirring around in your mind while you're making decisions, it actually turns out to be a shitload of information that's just very hard to quantify. And some guys, I think too, are just very good poker players who operate on more of the intuitive end of the spectrum, where you mentioned emotions there and feelings, and
I believe that the field players are reading the emotions of their opponents and understanding that like an overbet jam here as a bluff feels bad. Like it doesn't feel like it's something somebody would do or find in the moment. It feels much better as value because, the risk reward ratio or whatever the reasons might be. But like, that's another thing too, where we are all emotional creatures, human beings. We're all led by our emotions, especially when the pressure is on at the poker table. And the folks who can tap into that and use those emotions as data points to choose their actions, they're going to be quite successful, right? Like there are people that despise solvers and make fun of them and yet operate on a really high level and make millions of dollars every single year. And they have been for the past 15 years. And in my opinion, it's because of their ability to tap into the emotions of their opponents and just create good counters based on the specific models and tendencies that their opponents are using. And like that to me is ultimately one of the things that makes poker so fascinating is like there's multiple ways to skin a cat. There's multiple ways to win. And, those guys, you can't run a filter for felt bad in your hold'em manager, right? To make your decisions. But like, I know that for myself, this is a major thing that I use when I'm logicking my way through my thought process. It's like, oh, okay, so Dylan chose 1.5x here on the river, like looking at the spectrum of bet sizes, what bluffs would choose this? Is he more inclined to have bluffs? Is he more inclined to have value? What does he think my hand is? Like if he really had value, would he go for 1.5x? Would that feel good for him? Because I have a capped range? Probably not. Therefore, he's likely to be trying to make me fold. He's likely to have quite a fair amount of bluffs in this situation. So I just call. But again, it's a hard thing it's a hard thing to prove. It's an impossible thing to prove. And yet I know that it is a factor just because I've been playing this game for 16 years. And, like I said, humans are emotional creatures and you can hear the emotion in the Play and Explain videos that my students send in. You can hear the frustration. You can hear the annoyance. But anyway, that's I know I just went off on a little tangent there, but it's all interesting because there's just so many different ways to improve and play poker well. And as you said, all the best athletes, everybody has a coach. Like Roger Federer has a tennis coach. His tennis coach is not better than him. Like spoiler alert, he's not, right? But they all have them anyway to hold themselves accountable, to get insights that they may otherwise not have. And finding somebody that thinks about poker like you is first and foremost the most critical thing that you could ask for in a coach. Don't find a coach who approaches the game from a totally different way than you, because you're just not going to get the value.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So exactly. If somebody came to me and said, this is how I make decisions, and maybe in a similar way that you've just described, I don't think that I would do a good job with them, because I'm more of the side of like the technical, like mathematical, like, okay, so if he's betting this big, this is how many bluffs to value, value to bluff ratio, whatever. And I'm very much less on that emotional side, but of course it's a thing. So, and like if somebody couldn't, I wouldn't recommend someone coming to me for that kind of training or coaching, because I'm not going to be able to sort of move them in the right direction. But if somebody already had this sort of, someone who enjoyed the solvers and enjoyed working out the why, and was then able to sort of recognize where players very often deviate from equilibrium, or the approximation of equilibrium, then now we're talking. But you're absolutely right. Like, there's definitely more than one way to skin a cat, as it were. And I think it's just important to find someone who's on the same page. But I guess on the flip side is actually finding someone who's not, in order to sort of like push you to think in another way. But I think that trying to change the way you approach the game completely, like from one end to the other, is like really tough. But getting you to think about the game differently is really valuable, really important too. Yeah,
it can be. It can also crack you like an egg as it relates to your confidence at the poker table. And I have firsthand experience with that, which is something that I haven't really talked about. But like 3 months back, I traded coaching sessions with somebody who's an extremely high level technical player, just a really brilliant player, works with solvers constantly, always running sims, has just huge theoretical knowledge of the game. And we did a coaching session, and in mine, like, we went through the whole process, we broke everything down, and then he added his thoughts, which were very theoretically specific, right? And I kind of realized, like, whoa, this dude is operating like on a level of theory that is like way beyond me. And then I started questioning, like, has the game passed me by? Like, should I have invested myself into this specific area of learning over the past like 4 or 5 years? Like, have I missed out? Is everything passing me again? And what I came to realize is, like, his approach is just different than mine. And what's very fascinating to me is there are spots where, you know, he's inputting the information to the solver, trying to model somebody's actions so that he can figure out like what the best strategy is. Or he'll get stumped in a situation, and I'll look at the hand history and be able to just in 5 seconds say, I think you should do X. And then we run the sim and the solver says to do X exactly, which is like very interesting to me that I can come to the same conclusion as the solver, despite not using that methodology as my primary training tool over time. And yeah, it's just again, you know, don't feel like you have to learn poker in one way. If that way doesn't resonate with you, and if that way makes you feel uncomfortable and is not your strength, I think we all ought to lead into our strengths as human beings instead of kind of just, you know, having one methodology just kind of rammed down our throat. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always like keen to teach fundamentals through using like GTO, sort of in quotes, as a baseline, and then, you know, working out exploits from that way. But I can't see why you can't do it the other way. It's just not the approach that I've used, and so I can't say no, my way is the only way. You know, you should definitely be only, you know, following this route, because there are so many successful players who have followed the opposite route. So, you know, it's so many ways.
What's interesting is, like, I've always been able to see the exploits. I've always been able to see the cracks in my opponent's models for their play, and then exploit those cracks. And from the exploits, I've been able to build the theory around those, because it's like, oh, if they're making a mistake here, the theory ought to be X, Y, or Z. Like, I can make a logical extrapolation from the exploit to what the theory ought to look like, which, you know, I think is pretty interesting. But we've gone. I've taken us way off track here.
Jason, tell me about presence. Why did you think presence was the missing weapon in the arsenal of poker players?
So everyone's a mindset champion when they're running great, right? But when you're getting crushed day after day and you haven't booked a win in forever and the confidence just gone, and you're trying to do this thing that you read about in a book or someone told you about, being logical and being happy that the money went in good, when all you really want to do is cry and hit something at the same time. Like, how are you supposed to be logical in that moment? But that's the only moment when you really need it. What you need in that moment isn't mindset. You've already read all the mindset books and you already know what you're supposed to think and what you're supposed to do. What you actually need in that moment is presence. Presence is the ability to connect the dots between who you want to be and how you can actually be that person when you need it most.
So let's cut to the chase, right? Like, how do you do it? How do you stay more present when you're at the poker table?
Well, you get there by first deciding that you want more, right? That you want to grow your intuition, that you want to create more flow in your life, and that you want to reach your full potential as a player and as a person. And once you get there, you can start trying out some of the exercises and practices that I've put together. If it feels good, if you're enjoying it, you can keep going, right? And if you keep going long enough, eventually you'll find that you're just playing at really high levels, that you feel good with low stress, and you're enjoying your experience a lot more, not just at the table, but away from it as well.
I personally would love to have as much presence as I possibly can in my day-to-day life. And if you, the listener, right now wants to add some presence to your game, visit pokerwithpresence.com, join Jason Su's email newsletter, and then schedule a free consult with the master of presence himself. One more time, that's pokerwithpresence.com.
Let's go back to Gareth in college, or actually not in college. You're teaching, you're juggling your career as well, your music career as well as your poker career. What was the tipping point to when you said, I'm just going to go all in on poker?
Well, I can remember the key moment. I just busted a tournament at the Rio, and I went back to my hotel and just lay on the bed. And it was it's called half term. It's like spring break, I guess, in the States. So that's why I was in Vegas in the middle of a school year, and I was lying on the bed, and I was like, despite busting a tournament, I still wanted this to be what I did, right? And so in my head, I was like, right, I'm gonna resign. I'm gonna leave teaching, and I'd built up the coaching business to be at a point where it could support me as long, together with the playing poker. And I was like, right, well, that's it. So I flew home the next day, and I wrote my letter of resignation and took it in, and then worked out the last half term, like 6 or 7 weeks, and then that was it. That was me making the switch. But it had always been on my mind, because I was, I'd been putting things in place ready to go. Do you know what? Teaching, that's it. I'm done. Like 6 years. Yeah, as I think I said earlier on in the show, like it suddenly became not about music and not about enriching the lives of young people and making them, all around better humans. It became about data, and it became about, making them trying to get them a piece of paper or a grade at the end of the year so that the school would look good and would attract more students. So, and I realized that, I love teaching and I love helping people and I love poker. So I was like, right, well, that's what I want to do. And sadly, the passion for music kind of died away a little bit. It's still there a bit, but I don't play enough. I don't play as much piano or the guitar or anything like that. I wish I did, because I enjoy it, but I'm just pretty busy with poker stuff right now. So I made the switch, and then didn't look back, I guess.
Yeah. So laying on bed at the Rio after busting a tournament, you're like, I just want to play more poker. I do not want to go back to school and teach people music anymore.
That's basically it. Yeah.
And then never looking back. What year was that?
Oh, good question. 2014.
2014. So.
Is that right? Yeah, it was 2014. Yeah.
So what happened next after you made that decision to play poker and coach poker?
So that kind of that's exactly what I did for quite a while, and just played and coached, and I was making training videos for a site called Grinder School at the time, and then I got approached to make videos for Red Chip Poker, and so I was making videos for both of those. Then Grinder School decided, so they were aimed at like micro stakes and low stakes grinders. That's why it was called Grinder School, for anyone who's not familiar with it and might think it's to do with an app. So I'm making videos for them, and then I was getting coaching clients through that, and then I did the same thing with Red Chip Poker and made videos for them. And I guess through Red Chip Poker is where I sort of met Christian Soto, who I don't know if he still is, but at the time he was part owner of Red Chip, and we got chatting, and we would chat tournament poker a lot. Like, he was playing a lot more cash games, but we wanted to play more tournaments, so we would regularly chat about tournaments. And then he approached me in 2016 and said, we're looking for somebody to help Berkey for the Super High Roller Bowl in terms of ICM and stuff like that. Like, firstly he goes, do you know anyone? I was like, no, I don't. I'm not sure. Like, I'm thinking, like, do I feel comfortable enough? Should I put myself forward for this? This is the $300,000 buy-in tournament that Berkey's preparing for, and they've put together a great team. and they want someone to do ICM. And I'm thinking, not really. And then Soto just said, what about you? Do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, I do. So did a few sessions with Berkey leading up to that. And
why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you say, raise your hand? Me, I can do this. This is what I do.
Yeah, I honestly, I felt like I was a little bit out of my depth and a bit like imposter syndrome. Like, hang on a minute, this is Super High Roller Bowl. This isn't somebody playing like the Big 22 on PokerStars. This is a big step up. And I was at that point, I think I realized that my knowledge of ICM, knowledge of tournament poker, was actually good enough to help somebody in one of the biggest buy-ins of the year. But before then, I was like, this is crazy. Like, what's going on? But, it seemingly went well. I mean, we don't want to be results orientated, and, Berkey finished 5th for 1.1 million, but that's, it's not because of me. Like, maybe I helped a little bit, but the key thing was about the process and about me. We did some Skype calls before then. It's long before Zoom was a big thing. I did a session with him and Jordan Young and Christian at Berkey's home in Vegas. We went through some stuff on the morning of the final table, and that was actually filmed for the documentary on PokerGo called Dead Money. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, like there's I'm in episode either 6 or 7, I think, going through some things. It's quite funny to watch back.
That's awesome. And I think it speaks a lot to your character that when asked that by Christian, your first thought was, who do I know that might be better suited for this, for Berkey, right? I think that says a lot about you, that you didn't just say, oh, it's me. I know it, right? It's like, oh, let me think first about if I know anybody who is operating at a higher level that could be of more value or more assistance. I think that's, it's a really good character trait. It's a really good sign. So you helped Berkey with the ICM. You gained confidence 2016. When did you meet Tricia Cardner and, start effectively being partners with her on a number of ventures?
So that was in 2015. There was a red chip meetup at the Rio in Buzios, which is no longer there, sadly, a seafood restaurant. And we met there. We'd been conversing a bit on Twitter because I approached her about some mindset leaks that I thought I had, and wanted to touch base with her about that. So we first started talking then. And
what were the leaks?
What were the leaks?
Yeah.
Just dealing with downswings and losing confidence in my game, focusing too much on results rather than process. That kind of thing. Yeah,
that old chestnut.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like it's one of the most obvious ones that as a tournament player, but probably cash game player as well. You're going to have to deal with. Like, tournaments can be brutal, and you have to be prepared for downswings and for results to not reflect effort and stuff like that. So yeah, that's why I reached out to her originally, and then we met at the restaurant and for this meetup, and got chatting then. And I think we must have stayed in touch. I can't honestly remember the time when we decided that we were going to start a podcast. But suddenly then we had a podcast, and we're onto episode, I can't remember exactly, 94, 95, something like that now. So we're fast approaching episode 100, which is great. And so we started this podcast, and I really like the idea because my sort of feelings about poker is it's really important to get the sort of the technical strategy side down, but also to work on mindset. So I think that together we can, produce some really good content, especially for the podcast. And then we had this crazy idea in 2018 to write a book. We didn't feel that there was enough material on this sort of like the idea of learning and how to get better at actually learning poker. There's lots of stuff on the strategy. You find books on the strategy of poker, tournament poker, cash games, all the different variants. But there wasn't anything on like, how do you take all of the content that's available? Because there's so much now, Twitch, all the training sites, you've got YouTube videos, you've got articles, you've got podcasts, you've got, books still coming out. So how do you take all of that content and actually use it to help your own game and to help you get better at the game?
And doesn't sound like a crazy idea to me. It sounds like a pretty rational idea for a book. What did that process look like, y'all writing that book?
So it was funny because we did a lot of brainstorming. Like we had regular meetings and we put together lots of ideas and we'd share things together. And in my background, as I said, I trained to be a teacher, which meant I had a postgrad in education, right? So I understood how people learn, and obviously it was more about how children learn. From 11 to 18, that was my focus for
poker players.
School, high
they're
school.
Basically children anyway, so it's directly translatable.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I thought I could bring to the table, and obviously Tricia has worked within education as well as she has a couple of PhDs, and she was a lecturer, I believe. I can't remember where that was, but we both got experience of teaching and education, understanding how people learn. So yeah, we share these ideas, and then I think it got to like December of 2018, and we had to get the book in 2019, like the end of January, and not enough of it had been written. So basically I took the whole month off January to write. And so we would have like different sections that we would be working on, but then like share them and add to them and take stuff out and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it was a great process. It was something that I've always wanted to do. I always wanted to write a book. When I was younger, I didn't think I'm going to write a poker book. I thought I would write, I don't know, a novel or something. So I didn't think it was going to be a poker book. But yeah, the process was really great, and just something completely different from what I was doing as well. Like a lot of my content is audio or video, and so to actually do some written stuff, for me was really important. But I guess and I feel like you might go on to this question in a minute, where you say, but right at the start, you said that books probably weren't the best way to learn. So so I think that the key thing we talk about in the book is about active learning, active versus passive learning. And I think that if you're sort of actioning the suggestions in the book, and therefore being an active learner and taking active responsibility for your own learning, then I think that's good. But if you just literally just read 10 pages at night and then put it down, you're probably not going to get that much out of it.
Yeah, I mean, retention levels are not very high as it relates to the books that we read. When you take action, when you live the principles that you learn in the book, that's when they resonate. That's when an impact is made. And there's nothing that drives somebody to action like the imminent deadline, right? It's like, oh, I've got 1 month. We've got one more month to get this thing done, and we're not close. So let's go, right? Yeah. And that's just a kind of a law of the world, is like, when you don't have a deadline, you just take forever. So for the listener out there, give yourself deadlines as it relates to learning in your poker career and growing as a player. Like, give yourself deadlines to reach the points that you want to reach, so that you're striving for something on a daily basis. It's tangible. You know what you're working towards, and you're just taking regular actions. And so that the name of y'all's book, Purposeful Practice for Poker, all the P's. Could you just for a moment tell the listener why they ought to check out yours and Tricia's book?
Yeah, so I think, again, it goes back to what we're talking about, how, with all the training content that's available, how do you manage it and how do you organize your own learning time in order to sort of maximize efficiency, make sure you're getting the most out of it. And so the book is just the book will help you sort of develop the mechanisms or the techniques and the habits and routines to actually develop your own game. The whole idea about purposeful practice is that you're focused and specific on what you're actually trying to learn, not trying to learn too much. I feel like students will often try to learn everything and then get completely overwhelmed and realize how big the game is and how complex it can be. and suddenly then just lose motivation. And I think that if you're focusing on, to begin with, focusing on things that happen time and time again, like for example, like raise first in, big blind defense, c-betting in position, c-betting out of position, facing a c-bet after defending the big blind, those kind of things that happen time and time again. But literally not just going, okay, taking those 5 topics and going, right, let's learn all 5 topics, but actually just breaking it down and going, okay, what's the one thing that happens more than anything in poker where you have the opportunity to raise first in? And in tournaments, biggest leak that I see is for players looking for coaching is that they don't open enough hands, or they're opening the wrong sorts of hands from different positions. So starting off with that is actually really, really important, because it happens time and time again. And it, if you get it right, it means you're getting to the flop with the right ranges. If you get it wrong, you're not. And then all of the stuff that we do post flop and looking at how ranges interact, well, it's all wrong because you're not opening the right kind of hands. So, like it might sound basic to some to like look at raise first in as being the most important thing to get right first, but it's like it's a fundamental. It's a fundamental to whether you're playing tournaments or cash or any other variants where you have to raise first in. And I think so I think that being focused and specific on one topic is really important. So the book's going to help you keep it focused and specific, help you to write really good goals, and and then give you the sort of the process of like putting together a learning project and working your way through it, and then making sure that you're measuring your progress as you go. And I think that in tournaments, I don't know enough about cash games to be able to say this, but certainly in tournaments, it can be really hard to know if you're actually making progress, because you can like be seemingly feel like you're getting better. Your statistics, like your numbers are looking closer to where they should be, for example. But in terms of profit, you're still down, right? Or you're not losing, you're not winning as much as you want. And yet the only sort of the tangible measurement that you can see is the money and your bankroll or whatever, how much money you're making. I think it can be really, really hard for people to sort of get their head around that. And that's why like so many people, I want to highlight someone like Jason Kuhn, for example. I'm sure he's posted before on Twitter about the process is so much more important than the goal. Because once you reach the goal, you might not be that excited about the goal anymore. But if you're excited about the process for getting there, then that's the most important thing. So I think the book is going to get you to focus on the things that you can control, the things that you can influence, and sort of make sure that you're there's no excuses, right? You're doing everything you can do. In the end of the day, like in the long term, if you do all these things, you get better at the game, you will have the results. But in the short term, you might not get the results, but you got to like trust in the process and invest in that sort of the routines and habits to get better.
Yeah, trust is the key word. Trust that the way that you're doing things is going to yield financial returns at the end of your poker journey. And that's an easy thing to lose sight of. It's super easy to lose sight of it in cash games as well. When somebody has, a nice run, they win 15 buy-ins, and then over the next few months playing on a limited schedule, they lose back those 15 buy-ins, right? It's like, oh, I had it all figured out and then I lost it. And now I don't know anything about anything, and I'm just questioning life and my existence on the planet, right? When you're in this sort of like cyclical up 10 buy-ins, down 10 buy-ins, up 15, down 15, this long break-even stretch, it's really hard for people to have confidence in themselves that they are doing the right thing, that they are making good decisions, because, the reality is, like you said, the results don't reflect our decisions over the short term every single time. And because of that, when you lose confidence, you start throwing things out that you had been implementing that are profitable decisions because you don't know anymore. And basically you just keep burning down everything that you think you know and starting over from scratch over and over and over again because you don't have any confidence in the process. So it's vitally important to have a good model and be very confident in your model for playing winning poker, and just execute every day. Just execute. And ultimately, the side effect is that you win money, like that you are a profitable poker player. But, going back to what we talked about before, the emotions of poker. Emotions are motherfuckers. Like they're going to lie to us, right? They're going to take us to places that are untrue and that we will believe with all of our hearts are true. And it's really hard. It's really hard navigating poker, especially when you're emotionally biased and you lack confidence in your ability. So yeah, poker's a tough game. It's a game that will torture anybody who aspires to play it at a high level at some period of time. And yeah, again, going back to coaches, right? Like this is another major benefit of having a coach who, when you're in the midst of these downswings, that can reassure you and say, hey, you're actually making good decisions. I don't see anything bad here. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep up the good work. Even that is ultra valuable as it relates to the poker journey.
Absolutely, yeah. A couple of things I wanted to talk about. So there was the worst thing that can happen to someone straight away is for them to have a bink or to run like God in a cash game, because they get this sort of false confidence, and then it all goes downhill. And they just I must be I knew I was doing something right because I wouldn't have won this tournament if I wasn't doing something right. So I'm going to carry on doing that, and then they just lose it all back. And yet the flip side, the worst thing is also the second worst thing is that you don't have a bink at the start and you don't think that you enjoy this game because you're not getting any benefit from it. So you never actually get to realize that if you want to, take it further, you have to work hard and be consistent. And like you said, execute every day and trust in the process. So I think that's an important thing. I think that, one of the biggest bugbears for me when I see people, training sites or whatever, coaches advertising, their products, and they'll, or somebody will tweet a message and it will say, I got this course yesterday and today I shipped this tournament. And then it's retweeted by the training site because it's great. Like, it's fantastic they shipped the tournament. But there's no way they consumed enough in that one day to influence the fact that they then won the tournament. It's like this, I don't know. I don't even know what the word is to describe that. But it's disingenuous, probably.
I can tell you how I think about it. I think about it like it's great for the poker training site, right? They get all the glory. And then when somebody doesn't get the results, the person just assumes that they're implementing the strategies incorrectly. So they take the fall on their own. But yeah, I mean, I'll retweet somebody getting good results based on my products as well, just because, it's social proof, right? Like it's good for business, but ultimately the training sites are probably going to get way more credit than they deserve for, especially like a week-long member experiences of Bink. Like, come on, like they just that. But I guess you have enough members, you have enough subscribers. Some of them are going to hit tournaments. It's inevitable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got it.
Look, I totally get it. You feel like being a lone wolf in your poker journey has hamstrung your ability to realize your full potential. So I'm about to give you a golden opportunity to plug into a supportive tribe that will be the poker family you've always wished you had. How much money would you give for 1 hour of interactive group coaching led by myself, Coach Thomas, and occasionally past guests of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast? For now, and this will absolutely change at some point in the near future, the price of admission to the live Poker Power Hour is 100% free. All you've got to do to get your invite is head to chasingpokergreatness.com and hop on the VIP newsletter. No more excuses, no more procrastination. It's time to take action and put yourself in position to turn your poker dreams into reality. I hope to see that beautiful face of yours in just a couple of days.
Gareth, we're going to move on to a little bit of lightning round questions here.
Okay.
And you don't have to be rushed in your answers. It's not super quick lightning round activity. When you think about joy in your career playing cards, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
Probably I took down a $2 turbo tournament right at the start. We talked about, given that I just talked about this, having a bink at the start of your career. And this $2 tournament, I turned it into $2,000. And I can remember the pivotal hand. I got ace queen in against ace king on the final table with about, I think there's 6 or 7 left. flop comes ace, king, X. And I was like, oh, well, that's it then. All right, I'm going to bust in seventh for, I don't know, $200 or something. Okay, great. And then turn queen, river queen. And I was just like, whoa, like what's just happened? And then went on to win it. And at that stage, playing $2 tournaments, winning $2,000 was kind of a big deal. And that's sort of what kickstarted me into wanting to play poker. So that's the sort of like earliest like memory within poker. So I think it's interesting based on what I just said about, if I didn't have the bink, it's probably the worst thing that could have happened. But I think I was humble enough to know that I got super lucky on that final table, and there was still plenty to work on. I mean, I was playing $2 tournaments, so I'm not going to pretend I was, elite at that point.
I think so I was writing my newsletter before we hopped on this call that I will be sending out later today. And I was thinking of a metaphor for binking early in your poker career, right? And I thought of, do you remember the TV show MXC, Most Extreme Elimination Challenge? It was this.
No, I'm not seeing it.
It was a Japanese TV show in like the 80s, and then it was dubbed over in English and released between like in the early 2000s. Right. And basically players would go through all these crazy obstacles. The commentators would make fun of them. It was like an earlier iteration of Wipeout. And they played one game that they called wall bangers. And the contestant would rev up, run as fast as they could at this wall that had like an option of 3 doors. And one of the doors would be like paper mache, right? They would just burst through. And the other would be like solid doors. So they would just splat on the doors. And they had to go through like a sequence of 4 of them. And early on in your poker career, right? Like when you bink, you're running through those doors blindly and randomly choosing the right one. And then you win the game and you're like, I'm a genius. I made all the right decisions, right? Like, and that's just not how the world works. And in that specific game, one of the advantages of going like later on in the show is you watch the contestants. So you get to see like all of their failures so that you can make better decisions. And to me, that's a lot like what poker is. When you study, when you learn models that are proven to work, you're not guessing at which door is going to be the right door. You know the right door. You're going through the process. You're choosing the right doors over and over and over and over again. And when you do that, you win money. Like that's the side effect of, learning from all these other people who are just splatting their bodies across these locked doors. But anyway, we'll move on now. But that was just on my mind where, just because you guess a bunch of random lucky answers doesn't mean that you necessarily were operating at a high level. The opposite question, when you think about pain in your poker career, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
First memory. So I didn't really experience any kind of pain until the last World Series when I played 19 events and bricked them all. And I had the most humbling experience, I guess. Like the previous year, I'd come second in a 6-max tournament. And I came into the next year and I was like, okay, I've got this live poker down. Like, I'd mainly been an online player. Like 99% of my poker has been online. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to Vegas every summer. I'm going to make lots of money. And so I went in and I, played these 19 events and I bricked them all. And like, I got to the 19th. Well, I mean, it was well before then, but I got to the end of it and I was like, wow, what, like, this is like 19 games. I could play 19 games like tonight and brick them all like online. Like it wouldn't be an issue, but spread out over like 3 weeks that I was in Vegas. I was like, whoa, okay. So this can happen. Okay. And so that was probably the first memory of pain. Like I hadn't, or at least it was the one that sticks in my mind the most. Like I can't think of anything that was more painful than that. But actually, like it was, looking back on it now, it was like it was a good experience because it showed me that if it's possible to brick 19 events in a row over 3 weeks, and that might not even be the worst run I ever go on. Yeah.
It's better to know that these things are theoretically possible, though, without ever experiencing them, in my opinion.
Yeah, that would be nice, yeah.
What's some common poker advice you hear that you disagree with?
Wow. I'm not sure I have an answer. I think probably the idea that you've either got to be GTO or exploit, like, is one. Like, I think, yeah, okay. So the one bit of advice I would say is that people who believe that exploit is that's the way to make the most money. Now, of course it is, right? You're going to learn, like, you could learn poker, and in order to make the most money, you need to be sort of making the most of other people's mistakes, and that's going to come through exploiting them. But I think that this idea that you should just only focus on that rather than giving time for theory, giving time to like listen to what the solver might say, and let's say you do, like you mentioned earlier, like getting to the same point, getting to the same decision, to the answer is this. There's more than one way to get to the right answer, but I think that it's important to understand the theory. So I think that both are really, really important, but I think to dismiss one might be sort of quite limiting, and I think if that would be it. But I'm struggling really to come up with something that I really disagree with.
To me, like, they're two sides of the same coin. Like, they're directly related. Like, exploiting is just node locking somebody's inefficient model and taking advantage of it, right? And if you were to node lock a situation that your villain is constructing their strategy improperly, the GTO solution would be to take advantage of that and exploit that, right? Like, when you put the scenario into Pio assumes that one superhuman person is playing against another superhuman person, and like, this is the model that you ought to follow. And the reality is, like, humans operate way differently than the Pio model, and so like, you have to understand the theory in order to make the exploit, because they're directly connected. If you don't understand the theory behind the exploit, then you're not even accurately making an exploit. You can call it an exploit, but you can't prove it, and you don't really know. So yeah, to me, they're just two sides of the same coin, and you have to, like, you can't know what exploits are without knowing theory, and you can't know theory without understanding exploits. Like, they're just interrelated to each other.
Absolutely, yeah, 100% agree.
If you could gift all poker players one book to read, what would it be and why? And I know this is a low-hanging fruit for you.
Well, I mean, I've got to say my own book because it makes everything else easier to consume. So definitely Purposeful Practice for Poker.
Okay, secondarily, if you have like a stocking stuffer book for poker players, which it doesn't have to necessarily be about poker.
Probably something like Atomic Habits. James Clear, is that? I think
yep,
is the author.
James Clear.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good book, and I think every poker player should read that.
Nice. Haven't heard that one suggested yet. Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about poker, what would it be?
I guess like this idea of like matchups and like heads up for rolls and like this whole sort of like the Doug Polk versus Negreanu thing. Like feud, calling it a feud doesn't really, for me, attract we want to attract more people to the game. And some people are going to be like attracted by, there's this feud between two people. But actually we're trying, like, in my eyes, like, we don't want to make it negative. Like that for me is too negative. So I think it's like somehow like, wave the magic wand and get rid of the negativity and somehow make it more positive. Like, you can have competition without having like this sort of idea of a feud. And like, I don't think it's been a fantastic spotlight or example of poker, really.
There are many reasons as to why or how it could have gone down better. I don't necessarily disagree with the promotional aspect of like the trash talk and MMA type of build up to the match itself. I think that there's just been some kind of silly things that have come out as a result of the challenge. And I mean, ultimately, even when there's this promotional buildup between fighters, like they shake hands, they hug after they've gone through this war. And it's like they're professionals, right? I think ultimately we want our sport, we want our game to be represented by folks who carry themselves well and who are professionals and act professionally. And ultimately, I don't think that that's exactly how things have went down with this specific matchup. But on the flip side, the Galfon versus Vidi, I think both of them were the utmost professional and handled that with just amazing professionalism. And it was a great spectacle, a very entertaining and competitive matchup. So, yeah, I think that we should promote the things and heads up challenges. I'm all for it. Go for it. But again, represent poker, be a pro. That's just something that it matters to me personally.
Yeah. I mean, rivalry creates a storyline, right? And you get it in sport, so you have Ronaldo versus Messi. You get this rivalry of just local teams, derbies. And that's, it's that creates interest and excitement. But I think even with local football derbies, I'm an Arsenal fan. They're based in North London, so are Tottenham Hotspur. And Arsenal fans hate Tottenham Hotspur fans. And actually that idea of hate, hate's a horrible word. It's a big word. And you don't really hate Tottenham fans. I joke around. I've got Spurs or Tottenham fans as friends. We joke around the whole Arsenal versus Tottenham thing. But it's I don't actually hate them. That's so big. And I think that, there's they call it bitter rivalry. There's a bitter rivalry now between Negreanu and Polk. And I think that, rivalry is good, competition's good, but when it becomes bitter and negative and a feud, I'm just not sure that it's shining a great light on the game that we love. Well,
polarization draws in people.
That's true.
Those guys are definitely both very polarizing.
Yeah.
What's your current big goal as it relates to poker?
I would say that's more around helping more people. So helping people achieve what they want to achieve. And I think that it's not necessarily people come with goals to be, a world champion, for example. It's not necessarily a good goal. But just helping more people within poker achieve their dreams, whatever they are, right? Maybe it's just that they want to have a part-time income. Maybe they want to go from, leave their job and take up poker full time. Maybe they want to get to the next level. Whatever that is, just helping more people to achieve that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's helping people to construct their goals or their vision for what they're after as it relates to poker. Because like you said about Jason Kuna earlier, right? We have to love the process so that when we reach a goal, we can have our next goal ready to tackle and take down. So it's we need to set goals. We need to have a vision and a path for where we want to be. Else it's going to take much longer for you to get there. And ultimately too, you could be searching for something that doesn't really fulfill you when you reach it. And that is more criminal than almost anything else as it relates to goals, in my opinion, is accomplishing a goal that doesn't do anything for you is pretty brutal. It's you spend your time, your life force, your energy trying to do this thing, then you do it. And it's just pure emptiness at the end of the day. And want to try to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, I think I feel like some people set goals based on what they think will be the most impressive to other people, rather than actually what do you want? What do you really want to achieve? What's your vision? I'm reading a book at the moment called The 12-Week Year, and the top of it talks about what's the overall vision? What do you actually want? And then taking a step back and working it out and working it through. And then, right, okay, so you do your 15-year, 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 1 year. Okay, well then what's the step for the next 12 weeks that's going to get you to where you want to be, the quickest. But yeah, it all starts with having that big vision. And I think that, I sometimes think about my own sort of career path that, I went the traditional route. I did school. I did uni. I trained to be a teacher. I was a teacher. I had a full-time job with a pension. And I decided that's not what I wanted. I didn't want that traditional route. I wanted to be working for myself. I wanted to build a training site, a training program, and be a coach and be a poker player and, work when I wanted to work and have that freedom. And that's how I really feel now about my own coaching in terms of helping people get to that, helping people achieve their dreams, whether it is, time, freedom, whatever, getting to that point. But it has to be be like right for you. And I think that, certainly with the people that I work with, one of the biggest obstacles for them when they decide like, okay, I want to take poker more seriously, is like their relationship, whether it's with their wife, their partner, their parents, like trying to explain to their parents, oh, by the way, I'm going to leave this really well-paying job. I mean, I did the same. I'm going to leave this really well-paying job and I'm going to play poker full-time. I'm going to be a coach and I'm going to build my own business and I'm going to learn about business and marketing and all of that kind of thing. So I'm actually going to learn like on the job about doing all these, about what it takes to run a successful online business. And I think that can be hard, like for some people to take that. And if you've got you've got a family as well to support and you've got a mortgage to pay, like that can be tough. But I think that if your vision is this is what you want and you know exactly what it is, then you can then put the goals in place to achieve that. And you buy into it, you're emotionally connected to it, rather than like, I think that would be a nice thing to do. Oh, I'd love to play super high rollers or whatever. Like, maybe one day maybe in the back of my head, I'm like, it would be nice to play super high rollers, but it's not something that matches with my vision right now. Like I'm not like super excited. I'm not the thought of like, paying $300,000 to play a poker tournament. It's not something that I necessarily want to do at the moment. Like, I'm not saying that in the future that might be something to look at, but yeah, it's visions will change over time. But I think that if you've got a clear vision, it really helps to sort of nail down what it is what you actually want, and then you can then set goals to achieve that.
Yeah, I wanted to have an amazing podcast and be able to generate revenue using the podcast. And I realized, because I was very ignorant as it relates to digital marketing, digital promotion, digital sales and business, it was like, holy shit, the amount of things that I need to learn to make my vision reality was just overwhelming in this space, right? It's like, I've got to learn how to write sales copy. I've got to learn how to promote myself. I can't, I have a guest on this show for a very good reason. I don't really love being the center of attention, right? It's not just me monologuing, and that's just how I'm wired. So, being a promoter, selling things when your dream is to have an impact in people's poker career, you just have to man up and learn those skills, because there's no other option, right? And it's not always comfortable. But at the end of the day, when I know in my heart how much I love doing this show, how much I love my guests, and how much I come away from each conversation just feeling pumped up and full of energy, I want that to keep going. And so on those days when it's like, okay, got to bear down and crank out this sales page, and it's very hard and very difficult and not something that just comes to me naturally, like knowing that I'm doing it so that I can keep doing this show indefinitely powers me through. It's just, that's the power of, a why that resonates with you, so that you have the energy to do the bullshit that you're otherwise not going to feel like doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It comes back to that why. Yeah. So when you're, learning about poker, like understanding the why is important, but also the why, like, why do you play poker? Why do you want to have a successful poker podcast? Why do I want to develop my coaching business to impact more people? Right. So having, starting with why is really, really important, and having that purpose, I think, is, and it comes, again, it's that vision, why, purpose, those keywords, really important.
Yeah. And nothing comes easy. Everything is much harder than we think it will be at the end of the day. So you need to have a powerful why that pushes you through when things look very bleak and overwhelming. Gareth, just 2 more questions and we'll get you out of here, sir. First of all, do you have any projects you're working on right now that are near and dear to your heart?
Well, I would say that every project I'm working on at the moment, so from the the course that I'm putting together, the group coaching that I do, and the podcast that I do with Tricia, like they're all projects that mean a lot to me, and I put a lot of effort in. And going back to what I said right at the start, when I first saw my roommate like playing poker and thinking, wow, this looks like a quick way to make lots of money. And you just said there, like, it's about, like, actually it's a really hard work. Like, whether you're playing poker or coaching poker, you're developing a business, building a business, like, it is really, really hard work. So it's definitely not like it wasn't a quick buck, you know. So yeah, they're all, like, you know, really passionate for different reasons. Like podcasts, like, I just really enjoy, you know, talking to Tricia about poker and mindset, and, you know, various questions that we get sent in, and we have different viewpoints. And obviously hers is more like a, you know, sort of a research and scientific background, and mine's sort of like, you know, actually inside the game, and this is how I feel about it, and you know, maybe I'm getting some things wrong, and that's okay. But yeah, so there's those three things I think are the key things that I'm working on. My group coaching program, it's called MTT Game Changer, and it was set up to just really help accelerate people's learning. So it's a really nice community of people wanting to improve their game, and each month we look at a different topic or concept. And it's sort of the idea, you know, the idea of the book, right? It's Purposeful Practice for Poker. So I've taken that idea and put it into, okay, this month, this is what we're focusing on. So for example, this month we just finished blind versus blind pre-flop. And so we would just look at blind versus blind. We look at what the sort of the pre-flop solutions look like, where you want to be, you know, attacking small blind limps more, maybe where you want to adjust for people who aren't going to attack small blind limps. So looking at, like, the sort of the theory of the solutions, then looking at the exploits, and then we go in each month, we'll have a look at, like, member hand histories and see how they're approaching the spots, and what we can learn from it, and how you would actually take the knowledge from the group coaching sessions, the webinars, and actually apply them to your own game. And then each month these get packaged up and added to my online course. So, you know, it started off, like, you know, I think it was October 2019. We started off doing, like, the first module, which was raise first in, and then the second module was big blind defense, and then got a few modules together. And I thought, okay, let's package these up and put them out as an online course. And then I think we're on to module 12. No, actually, I think it's 14. We've got 14 modules now, right? So ever since then, every single month I'd put out a different module, and then it would become part of the online course. So yeah, I think it's those are the things that I'm very passionate about, very close to my heart. But in terms of, like, I almost feel like close to my heart makes me feel like I should be, like, you know, doing some community work or charity work or something like that. But I'm like that kind of project.
when what you do to help people out and pays your way through life is the thing that's close to your heart. I mean, does life get much better than that? Like, that's true. Yeah, that seems to me like a pretty good, damn good way to live life.
No, you're right. Yeah. I mean, I need to look at it more like that. Yeah. That's good.
Final question. So where can the Chasing Poker Greatness audience find your course and you on the World Wide Web?
So the first stop should be MTT Poker School. So MTT as in multi-table tournament, pokerschool.com, mttpokerschool.com. And then I'm on various social media. So on Instagram, I'll be Gareth James Poker. Twitter is at Gazelig Poker. And everything that you need, though, basically is on MTT Poker School. So all the links to the MTT Poker School Instagram, Twitter, Facebook page, YouTube channel, stuff like that, it's all on that main website, mttpokerschool.com.
Perfect. So head to mttpokerschool.com. You can click through in the show page of this episode. Gareth, it's been great having you on. Please return sometime in the near future for round 2. And thank you just very much for your time and your energy.
Well, likewise, it's been great, and I really appreciate you having me on. And I'll definitely come back for another talk.
Take care, man.
Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chasing Poker Greatness. If you have yet to subscribe to the show, please take a second to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts may be. For more content from me, Coach Brad, please visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/enhanceyouredge, and I'll see you next time.